Hi, I'm Karen Pullman, and this is how to stop people from pressing your buttons. We've all had times in our lives where somebody says something and we're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe they just said that. And our buttons get pressed. And so today we're going to go through a PowerPoint that goes along with the free download that you can get at KarenPullman.com. And we're just going to stop me right now and go to sharing my screen with you so that we can go through this, this quick presentation. How to stop people from pressing your buttons in 3 simple steps. Well, we've all had those times where somebody says something to us, right? They press a button, they say something and it just gets under our skin and we get completely spun out by it, right? It's almost like we're inviting them, press me. And the closer that person is to us, like a sister or a spouse or somebody in our family, right, the higher the potential to be triggered. Does that make sense? It's because we've let them into our inner circle, into our heart. And we let them into those vulnerable places in our lives, into our deepest thoughts and feelings, and they know us really, really well. And the answer is not to build a wall and keep them out, okay? That's not the answer. But how do we deactivate that button so it doesn't give that charge that we feel? So the other morning, my husband and I, we were having a conversation, and he was really just looking for a sounding board, and I didn't realize that at first. And I said something back to him, and it was more like I was in work mode, and I was like trying to fix it. And I tried to drop out of the conversation because I realized I was going in the wrong direction, and I got sucked back in. And he started saying some things to me that totally got me fired up. He's like, "You're being really unfair, and you're not being supportive." And that sort of stuff gets me so fired up. Like, I feel like I'm very understanding and very fair and very supportive of him. And when he says things like that to me, man, it gets under my skin, and shit like that gets me so fired up. Well, how do we stop people from using the things that they know are sensitive to us against us? Well, the quick answer is we don't, because we can't control people, but that's definitely not the end, okay? It's actually a 3-step inside job: deactivating, ditching, and deciding. First one is deactivating that button, okay? Key number 2 of the Live Another Way system talks about another way to listen. And one of the things that I've learned is to look at the information, to listen to that information that person is saying and that I'm receiving as it being just data, okay? It's neutral. It's like programming a computer. The computer does not care what information you put into it. Computers never get triggered like we do. It just responds to whatever information you give it. And so rather than reacting, which is what a trigger is, right? I deactivate the button by looking and listening to that information in a neutral way. It's just data. And then I ask myself, what is this person actually saying, right? What is actually being said here? Now, I just want to clarify. I'm obviously not perfect at this because I have an example, a recent example. But what happens is when you practice these keys of this system, the amount of time that you spend in that triggered state becomes less, and the intensity of the trigger lowers over time. And so practicing these keys are really going to be a huge benefit over time. So people can have whatever opinion they want to have, right? Or choose. They're entitled to their own opinion. We all are. Each one of us is entitled to our own opinion. An opinion is a view, a judgment formed about something, not necessarily based on fact or knowledge. Okay? Now I'm using the example of the conversation with my husband, but we can put anyone in this example. For instance, when when we post something online, there's comments from all over the place. You get on Facebook and gosh, especially if you say anything political, there's comments from everyone. Now, some people really like what I post and some people really don't. And everyone is entitled to their opinion. There's going to be outliers, okay? So there's going to be people who absolutely love everything that you say, and then there's going to be people who absolutely hate everything that you say. And each person has the ability to give their opinion and their judgment, and it's okay. When we realize that opinions are not facts, then it's easy to see that the information is neutral and it's not personal. It's not about us. It's more about them. However, if somebody says something that is a fact about us, well, then we need to accept it and own it. And if we don't like it, well, then we need to own that too and do something about it, whether we take responsibility to change, whatever needs to be changed to make it not a fact anymore. But if we reverse engineer this, okay, and we back out of it and say, if each person is entitled to their opinion, they're allowed to have that opinion. And they each have evidence to support their opinion. And you and I can still have a different opinion and see something different. It's just information. And listening to what people say as neutral data can actually be very helpful when we don't take it personal. It's information that someone is sharing with us. It's feedback, and it allows us to get a different perspective of how we are impacting other people. And if we take a step back and we breathe and we listen to what is actually being said by other people, and remember it's not personal and it's neutral, then we actually have an opportunity to learn something new. It's great feedback. Okay, next is ditch the right-wrong stance. If we agree that feedback, perspective, opinion is all neutral, then it can't be right or wrong. It's just neutral. It's just information. It's about perspective, right? Key number one in the Live Another Way system is another way to see. Okay, I'm going to use an example from the Bible. Okay, there's 4 books of the Bible, and they're called the Gospels. And 4 people, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, they all come and write a story about events that were happening, and they're all from the same time period, but you get it from 4 different perspectives. Okay, now when we read the Bible, if we read the Bible, we don't go around saying, oh no, Mark was wrong, it was Matthew's version that was accurate, or John was right and Luke was wrong. Each of them have their own perspectives on how things played out. In fact, having the 4 perspectives in the Gospels allow a reader of the Bible to get a much broader sense of what was going on at the time. Okay, it allows us to see more of a situation, which gives us more information to make better decisions and to see what we really think. The other morning when I got triggered with Brent, that morning I started to feel like I needed to defend myself. It was like he said these things and I was like, oh, what the heck? That is totally not me. I'm not like that. You're wrong. And sometimes when I get into that state, I want to make the other person wrong. Okay? It's typical human reaction. But if we make the other person wrong and we become right and we win and we feel good, it's like, really? I'm not really sure what we win in that. It usually doesn't feel like a win afterwards. And most of the time, even if we do feel good at the time, it's not for very long. It's short-lived. We're resisting when we take that stance and put our spear in the ground and take a stand of, I'm right and you're wrong. We are resisting. And that creates tension and more problems and more triggers because it's not a competition. If we are competing with another person, then someone will lose. And that's really not great in a relationship, right? Taking a stance of I'm right and you're wrong creates an opposition. And if most of the people who trigger us are people who are close to us and people who we care about, opposition is not a desirable outcome. We want to be on the same side in union with the people that we love. So when we take out the right, wrong, win, lose paradigm, right, like we just talked about, we make it neutral. And, you know, then we do, what do we do with all the tension when all of a sudden, you know, there's this paradigm of right and wrong, and we decide we're going to look at it neutral and we stop defending ourselves. But then all of a sudden we're sitting there and we have all this tension still left in our body, and we've stopped the right wrong thing. But then what do we get, you know, what do we do with that remnant tension? How do we really take it to the next level? Well, you need to decide what you're committed to. Okay, and this is where vision comes in. When my husband and I were having this conversation and he said these things to me, you're being unfair, you're not supportive, and I got triggered, I had a self-awareness of my triggered state. Okay, I decided to look at it as neutral information, and then I had to remember what I'm committed to, right? We each have these commitments, and a lot of them are unconscious. And by bringing them into an intentional vision of what we're committed to, it makes it easier to make decisions and decide how we want to behave and how we want to show up in life. Okay, and a long time ago, I had decided that I was committed to my marriage, right? To choose to look for a way to connect, to intentionally choose to find understanding even when there's conflict. And during my morning routine, that particular morning, I chose to be committed to abundance that day in particular and love. And when I found myself being triggered and having my buttons pressed, I had to go back to that place, you know, that I had just been maybe a couple hours earlier, and remember what I had decided I wanted in my life that day, what I was committed to creating in my life. And the answer was not conflict. It wasn't strife. It wasn't tension. It was love and fun and abundance and growth and contribution and passion. You know, these are all the things that I had intentionally chosen that day, that's what I wanted. So I'm just sitting there with all of this emotion inside of me, all of this tension from what had just happened. And it's sitting there, and I realize, okay, this is just information. It's neutral. It's not personal. It's just an opinion. But I still feel really shitty inside. So in order to pop out of that state, we need to ask ourselves different questions, okay? And I intentionally chose how I was going to respond to the information I received. The question came up for me was, well, what can I learn from this? Okay, and when you ask yourself what you can learn from something, it gives your brain something to do, a directive, an objective. It takes you out of that bubble of tension, and it sort of pops a hole in the side of that bubble so all of the energy can get channeled out. And that one path out of the tension goes into answering the question that you give it. And what I said was, what can I learn from this? Or what is great about this? Or how can I help somebody else with this? So if you give yourself a functional place to go with that energy, your brain is set up to come up with an answer. It just does. You can test it out yourself. If you say, what is great about this? You're going to come up with an answer. If you say, why does this always happen to me? You're going to come up with an answer. If you say, what is, awful about this? Your brain's going to come up with an answer. So we might as well give it an intentional task that supports your commitment to your vision. That morning, what I came up with was, all right, well, I had been planning on writing out this whole trigger process. That was one of the things that I had been planning on doing and was on my list of things to do for my coaching business and for my clients. And when all of a sudden I started thinking, all right, what's great about this? What can I learn from this? I realized, oh, God gave me this opportunity today to get triggered so I could actually deconstruct it and share it with you. Well, when we are given new information to assess and we look at it, right? We all of a sudden look at it and say, all right, somebody's giving me this information. We may find out that we're coming off in a way that is impacting other people in a negative way, right? It gives us an opportunity to make a change. Or it also gives us an opportunity to maybe look at the information of what someone is saying about us and decide, no, I don't agree with that feedback. And I see it differently, and maybe I don't need to change. But all of this feedback that we are impacting with, right? All of a sudden we get feedback from somebody and we realize that we're impacting in a positive way. Well, that's great too, right? When somebody says something like, oh my gosh, I felt really loved by that, that's feedback. It doesn't mean we're, any more or less important. It's feedback. It's the things that people say to us that give us the information to know how we are impacting other people. So when we are impacting in a positive way, we know what we need to keep on doing. And when we're impacting in a negative way, well, it's up to us to still decide what we want to do with the information. Is that something where we need to make a change? And we need to decide what next step do we need to do that's going to support the vision that we have for our life. So the download on KarenPullman.com gives you the steps that we just talked about today: deactivating the button, ditching the right-wrong stance, and deciding what you're committed to. And it also gives you this chart here that you can put up in a place in your house, in your car, where you find yourself getting your buttons pressed, as a great reminder. And then also, if this information interests you and you want to look more into it and start exploring some of the 7 keys of the Live Another Way system, then please do go to KarenPullman.com and request a free discovery session or strategy session. And we can talk more about how you can live another way. Thanks for stopping by today.